There we go. All right. What up? Okay, I'm in a good, right and proper mood. Welcome to the show, everybody. Let me see. Do I have any activity? I do. All right. How's it going? We got a new name. Anthony Makes Videos. I appreciate you reading sections of Being in Time in these streams. Much more personal and a deeper dive than a 45-minute general lecture on Heidegger's life, times, etc. Thank you. Thank you. Hey, listen. The academic field has its place, its importance in talking about this. I've listened to a handful of lectures, and it was primarily hearing Michael Tsarion suggesting that people listening to a particular thing he was doing say, you ought to go read Heidegger and, see how you feel when you come out the other side of it. Hey, QSB, what up, Quite Sparky Bear? So, yeah, and I think that it's important that these kinds of works, that we're not afraid, even though we've got terrible setbacks. Like, I'm missing the context of various words in German. I'm missing the context of all sorts of things. Hang on a moment, folks. All right. Whoops. We'll be back on camera in a minute. The Greek, of course, for anything of this philosophical situation that's going on with Heidegger. So at any rate, we're here. We're going to get right started today on Division 2. So we're officially halfway through the book. So we're on chapter 45. I had a look. I want to be here till maybe 8. So it'll be fantastic. We should be able to get a couple of chapters in this period of time. All right. So let's see. Is this? Hold on a minute. Let's align that. That's probably too small or too big. Hold on a minute. All right, we'll do it that way. Because I'm sick and tired. I try to make it as big as possible, mostly for you, because I have no problem reading it at this size. But I know that some of you are maybe trying to read along on your phones or something. And then, of course, I am so vain that you just have to see how my my exercise regiment is going from my upper body. Okay. Division 2, Dasein and Temporality. There's literally an annotation. There's an annotation right there. So let me go to the bottom. And what are we? Come here. All right. Dasein und Sittlichkeit. In this heading and in others which follow in this division, we have capitalized such words as temporal and constitution in accordance with normal practice in titles, even when this violates the orthographic conventions of our translation. All right. 45. The outcome of the preparatory fundamental analysis of Dasein and the task of a primordial existential interpretation of this entity. What have we gained by our preparatory analysis of Dasein, and what are we seeking? In being in the world, whose essential structures center in disclosedness, we have found the basic state of the entity we have taken as our theme. The totality of being in the world as a structural whole has revealed itself as care. In care, the being of Dasein is included. When we came to analyze this being, we took as our clue existence. Let's see here. Which, in anticipation, we had designated as the essence of Dasein. I'll be back on in a second, folks. This term, existence, formally indicates that Dasein is an understanding potentiality for being, which, in its being, makes an issue of that being itself. In every case, I myself am the entity which is in such a manner der Gestaltsein by working out the phenomenon of care. We have given ourselves an insight into the concrete constitution of existence. That is, an insight into its equiprimordial connection with Dasein's faceticity and its falling. What we are seeking is the answer to the question about the meaning of being in general, and prior to that, the possibility of working out in a radical manner this basic question of all ontology, but to lay bare the horizon within which something like being in general becomes intelligible is tantamount to clarifying the possibility of having an understanding of being at all. An understanding which itself belongs to the constitution of the entity called Dasein. The understanding of being, however, cannot be radically clarified as an essential element in Dasein's being, unless the entity to whose being it belongs has been interpreted primordially in itself with regard to its being. Let's see here, how are we doing? Are we entitled to the claim that in characterizing Dasein ontologically, qua care, I think that's QUA, qua care, we have given a primordial interpretation of this entity? By what criterion is the existential analytic of Dasein to be assessed as regards its primordiality, or the lack of it? What indeed do we mean by the primordiality of an ontological interpretation? Ontological investigation is a possible kind of interpreting, which we have described as the working out and appropriation of an understanding. Every interpretation has its forehaving, its foresight, and its foreconception. If such an interpretation becomes an explicit task for research, then the totality of these suppositions, which we call the hermeneutical situation, needs to be clarified and made secure beforehand, both in a basic experience of the object to be disclosed and in terms of such an experience. In ontological interpretation, an entity is to be laid bare with regard to its own state of being. Such an interpretation obliges us first to give a phenomenal characterization of the entity we have taken as our theme, and thus to bring it into scope of our forehaving, with which all the subsequent steps of our analysis are to conform. But at the same time, these steps need to be guided by whatever foresight is possible as to the kind of being which the entity may possess. Our forehaving and our foresight will then give us, at the same time, a stretch of that way of conceiving, or foreconception, to the level of which all structure of being are to be raised. If, however, the ontological interpretation is to be a primordial one, this not only demands that, in general, the hermeneutical situation shall be one which has been made secure in conformity with the phenomena, it also requires explicit assurance that the whole of the entity which it has taken as its theme has been brought into the for having similarly. It is not enough just to make a first sketch of the being of this entity, even if our sketch is grounded in the phenomena. If we are to have a foresight of being, we must see it in such a way as not to miss the unity of those structural items which belong to it and are possible. Only then can the question of meaning of the unity which belongs to the whole entity's totality of being be formulated and answered with any phenomenal assurance. Has the existential analysis of Dasein, which we have carried out, arisen from such a hermeneutical situation as will guarantee the primordiality which fundamental ontology demands? Can we progress from the result we have obtained, that the being of Dasein is care, to the question of primordial unity of this structural whole? What is the status of the foresight by which our ontological procedure has hitherto been guided? We have defined the idea of existence as potentiality for being, a potentiality which understands and for which its own being is an issue. But this potentiality for being, as one which is in each case mine, is free either for authenticity or for inauthenticity, or for a mode in which neither of these has been differentiated. In starting with average everydayness, our interpretation has heretofore been confined to the analysis of such existing as either undifferentiated or inauthentic. Of course, even along this path, it was possible and indeed necessary to reach a concrete determination of the existentiality of existence. Nevertheless, our ontological characterization of the constitution of existence still lacked something essential. Existence means a potentiality for being, but also one which is authentic. As long as the existential structure of an authentic potentiality for being has not been brought into the idea of existence, the foresight by which an existential interpretation is guided will lack primordiality. Okay, as I was reading along, I was waiting for something good that really caught me to comment on, and as this sentence was coming to a close, it was coming to me. Hail, I'm late. I'll have to watch the replay. Hey, what's up, Nicholas? Well, I've been at it for only about 10 or so minutes. There were some introductions, but okay, so here he is trying to put the whole bit with Dasein and existence into applicable reality, right? And he's making this very important point, because existence versus the existential, right? As long as existential structure of an authentic potentiality for being has not been brought into the idea of existence, the foresight by which an existential interpretation is guided will lack primordiality. Okay? So, like, you can wax philosophical, if you will, right? You can navel gaze, you can blow your crown chakra out into the Akashic records to go through the multiverse of knowing what's going on and all the other timelines, so on and so forth, right? If you can't get that structurally to have anything to do with this, then it's not supposed to have anything to do with this, and thus it actually isn't in existence for us. It's nothing to be real other than a personal experience that you're having of something that is real in another world that only you have access to in your mind. And it is real, and I'm not condescending to any of you who have had visions, because I have visions too. But, I think we went through a long period of time where the strange and unusual ones, they had no wherewithal of what to do, and all they needed was for people to believe them and understand they aren't crazy, or at least not a threat to society, right? And this is about making that space, but it's also to recognize that now it's time. Yeah, like, yes, we believe you that you have a condition, and we're all here for you because you've got this condition that's associated with your metaphysical abilities, right? You know, you see aliens or something like that. You've experienced abductions, maybe. You know, some of that very unpleasant experience, right? You know, it's been a hard mantra for me as of late, because that's just where my attitude is at. It's just a tough love attitude, and there's contextual differences about what it means. But you know, there are no victims. There are no victims. Only fools. All right. So the fool is going to step over that cliff, and the dog is a symbol of all the warning signs about, hey, there's a cliff. It's of sure foolhardiness and harmful foolishness to kind of run off the cliff. Don't do that, right? But sometimes the cliff is a very, very long thing, and you can't tell that you're running yourself off of a cliff because you really aren't, you don't know how to look far enough. You know, you're choosing to travel unknown territories in the fog, and you're traveling the unknown at an alarming speed of recklessness. And, you know, we live in a world where if you're going to be that reckless, don't have any witnesses, because witnesses care, das Sein and care. Witnesses will care about you, whether you like it or not, and they will interfere, whether you like it or not, for either personal reasons, public reasons, or just because they're the little dog trying to tell you not to jump over the cliff. You have to make your own judgments about that, and you have to look someone in the eye and say, I accept if this kills me. Thank you. Right? Sometimes you just have to do that and take away the argument. And then they have to make a lesser argument than death, because I've already taken death out of the equation, right? If you haven't taken death out of the equation, then you better listen to that person who says you're going to die. Because they know better than you, probably. Because the witness sees something in your shadow that you don't. It's just something that everybody does. It's just part of the nature of the shadow, is that there's always a part of the shadow that you don't know that someone else knows. And that's why we get shocked when we don't know why someone likes us or doesn't like us, because we went through first impressions, but then it was after first impressions things didn't go better, or, you know, there wasn't more bonding. There was perhaps more severance afterwards, right? And it's because the things we like and dislike about other people that it can go beyond words. It's something you pick up on. Maybe you don't like something in someone's body language that tells you that they're hiding an issue that is going to cause too much drama or something. You know, I think we get an idea. I think we got a picture painted here that makes sense to you. I would assume, right? All right. Let me see. Can I adjust that? I'm just noticing now that it's... Oh, okay, that could be slightly... Can I move this? Wait, no, I can't. Move this. Whoops. No, okay, that's fine. All right, good. Sorry about that. All right. So, What is the status of the foresight by which our ontological procedure has hitherto been guided? We have defined the idea of existence as a potentiality for being, a potentiality which understands and for which its own being is an issue. But this potentiality for being, as one which is in each case mine, is free either for authenticity or for inauthenticity, or for a mode in which neither of these has been differentiated. In starting with average everydayness, our interpretation has heretofore been confined to the analysis of such existing as is either undifferentiated or inauthentic. Of course, even along this path, it was possible and indeed necessary to reach a concrete determination of the existentiality of existence. Nevertheless, our ontological characterization of the constitution of existence still lacked something essential. Existence means a potentiality for being, but also one which is authentic. As long as the existential structure of an authentic potentiality for being has not been brought into the idea of existence, the foresight by which an existential interpretation is guided will lack primordiality. So, okay, my God, the way I move that around, I just reread everything I made the point on. So, I hope that overview worked for you. Sorry about that. And how about what we have had in advance in our hermeneutical situation hitherto? How about its forehaving? When and how has our existential analysis received any assurance that by starting with everydayness, it has forced the whole of Dasein, this entity from its beginning to its end, into phenomenological view, which gives us our theme? We have indeed contended that care is the totality of the structural whole of Dasein's constitution, right? So that's what he's talking about the primordiality, right? The structure of the care. So you're imagining something, but you don't see where this thing in your imagination is leaning interest on you, right? Or you're pointing out something that you're saying is associated with something that has care, dark care, light care, whatever way that care, it's concern and interest in you is manifest, and you're talking only about that which is manifest, and then saying theoretically this structure is the reason why this is happening, right? Your taxes are unfair because of this structure in the existential, right? And let's see, so where was I as a whole? The beginning, phenomenological theme. We have indeed contended that care, totality, structural whole of Dasein's constitution, but have we not, at the very outset of our interpretation, renounced the possibility of bringing Dasein into view as a whole? Everydayness is precisely that being which is between birth and death. And if existence is definitive for Dasein's being, and if its essence is constituted in part by potentiality for being, then as long as Dasein exists, it must in each case, as such, a potentiality not yet be something. An entity whose essence is made up of existence is essentially opposed to the possibility of our getting it in our grasp as an entity which is a whole. Not only has the hermeneutical situation hitherto given us no assurance of having the whole entity, one may even question whether having the whole entity is attainable at all, and whether a primordial ontological interpretation of Dasein will not founder on the kind of being which belongs to the very entity we have taken as our theme. Now, if you guys had listened to my discourse on Loki, Season 1 and Season 2 with Slick Dissident, the quantum mythology video. It's quite good, and of course I'm in the midst of reading Heidegger now and Dasein and making several Dasein-oriented points throughout our discourse. And the Loki series, it is about the trickster archetype, you know, trying to have the whole of Dasein, right? And that's what Loki achieves in the finale of the series as he takes the throne of time and space and is the knot at the center of the singularity of all things, which is what Odin actually is, and which is our striving to attain is the complete and perfect cosmic knowledge of the all. Right? That's the level of power that is, because it's essentially built into a non-linear thinking pattern about what the whole meaning of your life is. One thing has become unmistakable. Our existential analysis of Dasein up till now cannot lay claim to primordiality. Its forehaving never included more than the inauthentic being of Dasein and of Dasein as less than a whole. Als Unganzes. If the interpretation of Dasein's being is to become primordial as a foundation for working out the basic question of ontology, then it must first have brought to light existentially the being of Dasein in its possibility of authenticity and totality. So let's look at it this way, right? Because this is where the epistemology of objectivism, Ayn Rand's core way of processing Dasein, is, you know from the limits of you as one subject, cannot just take a three-dimensional object at face value. Simple things. I got a box of Meiji chocolates here, right? This box looks different on each side. It says different things on each side. You have to look at it at different angles to get the totality of it. That's about as basic a definition of objectivism that I can fucking give any goddamn human soul. And if you can't apply that wisdom to abstract thought, you're fucking doomed. I don't even know if Ayn Rand actually could apply that to abstract thought. Like, her works are so fucking left brain, they hurt. Amazing, but they hurt how left brain they are. But anyway, and I don't think she was into brutalist freaking art. It was hard to tell, and I still need to get through the Fountainhead, and of course, I'm like, it's very interesting hearing the discourses about people's interpretations of the aesthetics and the purpose of architecture, right? Because, like, there is kind of a being in time sense of Dasein going on over here in the way he's talking, because he's talking like a building. It has structure, right? Like you're a construction worker, you're in the frame of the building, the walls aren't up yet, so you've got your, how your foundation's laid out, like you've got all the bare bones there, and the rest of the building can naturally kind of fill in now that you have a grid work to decorate it. And, it's structure, but it's not a building yet, but this is all the structure you need as your framework for making it a building, right? And so, the book is riddled with arguments over design choices based on people that are, saying as a business, it's like business. I mean, she's a business person like Ayn Rand, right? It's very interesting, her approach. It's just like, look, we like these conventions this way. We want this architecture done this way. It's been done this way before, and people like it. And then, like, Ayn Rand's main character is making, like I'm almost, like, don't know if I should take his side, right? I've only gotten through, like, section 1, right? And so I got a lot of work to do in understanding the whole thing, right? Because I'm sitting there, and I'm just like, and I'm just like, why is this guy working so hard to make buildings that people don't want to live in, right? That's like the way all the arguments are coming down. It's like, listen here, I've got a vision of all these buildings. When I build it, people will want to live in them, right? That's his way of looking at it. And people are saying, here are the kind of buildings that people want to live in. And he doesn't like doing that. Now, at the end of the day, it's not the point whether I actually agree with his vision or not. Put yourself in his shoes, dealing with something that you love that nobody else fucking wants. Right? That's what everybody deals with. You know, everybody that has to bitch and complain that they don't have enough subs. Everyone that has to bitch and complain under the beliefs that, you know, the CIA is purposely picking on their social media. Whatever it is, right? It's just like, sit back for a second and ask yourself, if you're a business platform, why are you complaining? You know, it's up to you to know how the business works, because there's people riskier than you, more successful than you, and they do things differently, and they work hard. Are you also doing things like them and working hard? Right? So I sit here with my amount of subs or whatever. I don't fucking complain. I'm as successful as I am meant to be, and I've got everything worked out, and I'm still working, and still growing, and still building, and that's okay, because that's the only thing that fucking matters to me. Let's take a little break here, I think. Hold on. No, let's get to the end of this, and then we're gonna take a break. All right. Shoot, how far back did I go? So interpretation will lack primordiality. I think I was right here. I did it again, folks. I didn't freaking save it before I scrolled down. And how about what we have had in advance for the hermeneutical situation hitherto? Wait, no, I must be further than that. Yeah, no, because I remember reading Uzganziz. See, good thing I found that. Oh, what was that? What was that? Voluntary deoccultist, how are you? Oh, you throwing out, what'd you throw out there that you retracted? Don't be shy. I've heard you before. You're cool, right? I don't think I've heard you troll me. Or even if you troll me, go ahead and speak up. I'll just slay you. I'm a troll slayer, you know. People have seen. There are legends of troll smites, you know. And I don't even have to have a platform. I could just be doing it in the chat, and I'll just smite you if you're trolling. It's scary and impressive. You'll like it. But anyway. Okay, thus arises the task, I'm just going to start from here, of putting Dasein as a whole into our forehaving. This signifies, however, that we must, first of all, raise the question of this entity's potential for being a whole. As long as Dasein is, there is in every case something still outstanding, which Dasein can be and will be. But to that which is thus outstanding, the end itself belongs. The end of being in the world is death. This end which belongs to the potentiality for being, that is to say, to existence, limits and determines in every case whatever totality is possible for Dasein, if, however, Dasein's being at an end. Okay, we have an annotation right here. So I'm definitely not rereading stuff because I would have noticed that. So I think we're in the right spot. This says, Zu and Sein. This expression is to be distinguished from sein zum Ende, which we shall translate as being towards the end. Let's see. It's 4:20 p.m. here. Ha! If I want to see a change, I have to be that change. Hails. Damn straight. Damn straight. Damn straight. Like I said, that's all part of the are no victims, they're only fools. Just remember that. The biggest exception to that rule are children that have not discovered their agency yet. And unfortunately, being a man-child is not an excuse. Eventually, it clicks whether you went through an adulthood initiation or you thought you did, but you really just got your driver's license and everyone says that's what it was. No, it wasn't. Now you're just a child with the ability to kill people by accident. We're all similar wavelength. Right. I feel you there. All right. Okay, so back up top. So being at an end in death. And wherewith its being a whole are to be included in the discussion of its possibility being a whole. And if this is to be done in a way which is appropriate to the phenomena, then we must have obtained an ontologically adequate conception of death, that is to say, an existential conception of it. But as something of the character of Dasein's death is only in an existential being towards death, sein zum Tod, the existential structure of such being proves to be the ontologically constitutive state of Dasein's potentiality for being a whole. Thus, the whole existing Dasein allows itself to be brought into our existential forehaving, but can Dasein also exist authentically as a whole? How is the authenticity of existence to be determined at all, if not with regard to authentic existing? Where do we get our criterion for this? Manifestly, Dasein itself must, in its being, present us with the possibility and the manner of its authentic existence. Unless such existence is something that can be imposed upon it ontically or ontologically fabricated, but an authentic potentiality for being is attested by the conscience. And conscience, as a phenomena of Dasein, demands, like death, a genuinely existential interpretation. Such an interpretation leads to the insight that Dasein has an authentic potentiality for being, in that it wants to have a conscience. But this is an existential possibility which tends from the very meaning of its being to be made definite in an existential way by being towards death. By pointing out that Dasein has an authentic potentiality for being a whole, the existential analytic acquires assurance as to the constitution of Dasein's primordial being. But at the same time, the authentic potentiality for being a whole becomes visible as a mode of care, and therewith the phenomenally adequate ground for a primordial interpretation of the meaning of Dasein's being has also been assured. Let's see. Yep. All right. There we go. All right. But the primordial ontological basis for Dasein's existentiality is temporality. In terms of temporality, the articulated structural totality of Dasein's being as care first becomes existentially intelligible. The interpretation of the meaning of Dasein's being cannot stop with this demonstration. The existential temporal analysis of this entity needs to be confirmed concretely. We must go back and lay bare in their temporal meaning the ontological structures of Dasein, which we have previously obtained. Everydayness reveals itself as a mode of temporality, but by thus recapitulating our preparatory fundamental analysis of Dasein, we will at the same time make the phenomenon of temporality itself more transparent. In terms of temporality, it then becomes intelligible why Dasein is and can be historical in the basis of its being, and why, as historical, it can develop historiology. All right, good. Oops. Let me double check again how far. Oh, that's it. Okay, this is the last page. If temporality makes up the primordial meaning of Dasein's being, and if moreover this entity is one for which in its being this very being is an issue, then care must use time, and therefore must reckon with time. time reckoning is developed by Dasein's temporality. The time which is experienced in such reckoning is that phenomenal aspect of temporality which is closest to us. Out of it arises the ordinary, everyday understanding of time, and this understanding evolves into traditional conception of time. By casting light on the source of time in which entities within the world are encountered, time as within timeness, we shall make manifest an essential possibility of the temporalizing of temporality. Temporizing of temporality, which means... okay, it's just in German. Okay, annotation 2 we're going to read. We don't need to read 1. Primordial, okay. Oh, and it's right here, too. Therewith the understanding prepares itself for an even more primordial temporalizing of temporality. In this is grounded the understanding of being, which is constitutive for the being of Dasein. And so that means, in it is not clear whether the pronoun refers to Zeitgung, temporalizing, or Zeitlichkeit, temporality. Okay, so there's a little bit of contextual leeway with the word IHR, so in this grounded of being a design, within the horizon of time, the projection of a meaning of being in general can be accomplished. Thus, the investigation comprised in the division which lies before us will now traverse the following stages. Dasein's possibility of being a whole and being towards death for Chapter 1. Dasein's attestations of an authentic potentiality for being and resoluteness, Chapter 2. Dasein's authentic potentiality for being a whole and temporality as the ontological meaning of care, Chapter 3. Temporality and everydayness, Chapter 4. Temporality and historicality, Chapter 5. That's going to be very interesting to me, temporality and historicality, because a lot of us are trying to reconstitute the world because we know that we were undereducated, if not miseducated, on history. And now we're seeing the consequences of that as people like me are going through a tremendous amount of things that are considered absurd to the ordinary people in the world. Temporality and within timeness as the source of the ordinary conception of time, Chapter 6. All right, so we're going to take a little break. We're going to listen to some more orbit culture, because I'm seeing orbit culture on Saturday. So this is what you're going to listen to know what I'm listening to. And we will be right back. I went old school on this one. This is from the Odyssey album. Right? So this song's called Wildfire. All right, excellent. Let me kill that. There we go. Good, good, good. I have successfully muted the advertisements. They do not have to pollute those microseconds of the air where then you have to hear, hey, you want to buy a super product? Blah, 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 and I'm like, shut the fuck up. It's the price you pay for just ripping it right off the YouTube feed on your computer, right? Okay, uno momento, por favor. I just want the next break to be set up as we're chugging along here. All right, that'll be Fabu. All right. So here's chapter 1 proper, right? You know, because I talked about chapters, like I say, chapter 45, chapter 46. Like, I guess these are just, I probably missed it when it was said, because it's just like, I'm so focused on just making sure I'm following the philosophy that, like, the book structure stuff that he has to bring up, like how things are chapter sequenced, it's just like I'm missing the terms for it. So it's just like part 46, chapter 46. So I'm interchanging the wrong terms. I do that with different things. It's confusing, and I'm sorry, but it's what I got to work with. All right. Dasein's possibility of being a whole and being towards death. The seeming impossibility of getting Dasein's being a whole into our grasp ontologically and determining its character. Whoops, hold on a second. At some point I got to do some upgrades. I want to get a second computer screen so I can just shove certain things over here and certain things over here. The inadequacy of the hermeneutical situation from which the preceding analysis of Dasein has arisen must be surmounted. It is necessary for us to bring the whole Dasein into our for-having. We must accordingly ask whether this entity, as something existing, can ever become accessible in its being a whole. By the way, if I could get some feedback, I'm sorry about that cough, because obviously I like my habit, and thus I might cough. But then again, I'm going to cough anyway, because this kind of talking is going to dry you out. So this doesn't make it any better, but I am trying to use my stuff, because it's not that I can mute the cough necessarily, but I can have my sound levels where the cough is just the same kind of impact as the rest of my voice, and that's the best I can ask for. So, sorry about that cough. It's probably going to happen again. All right. In Dasein's very state of being, there are important reasons which seem to speak against the possibility of having it presented, vorgebe, in the manner required. The possibility of this entity being a whole is manifestly inconsistent with the ontological meaning of care, and care is that which forms the totality of Dasein's structural whole. Yet, the primary item in care is the ahead of itself, and this means that in every case Dasein exists for the sake of itself. There, I had a chance to turn my head. As long as it is right to its end, it comports itself towards its potentiality for being, even when it still exists, but has nothing more before it and has settled abgeschlossen its account. Its being is still determined by the ahead of itself, Hopelessness, for instance, does not tear Dasein away from its possibilities, but is only one of its own modes of being towards these possibilities. Right, a mode of being towards a possibility, right? That's what it is when you're having the experience of it. The hopelessness is an existential, right? Because it's talking about, because hopelessness means that you don't have faith that something that makes you happy or something that you love will be in your everydayness tomorrow. Just a state of being that changes, right? You know, we all went through it. We all went through it in 2020. And we all had to ask ourselves the hopelessness of that situation. None of us thought that everything would be quite like this. There's plenty of people that are still living in a dystopia. What's really funny is that they're forcing it on themselves, right? It's like I could probably move to the city right now and be completely unaffected, watching every other neighbor dystopianized but me. I like, it's just something about it. It's just like, it's the way I saw that difference manifest as I stood alone in my world, in my Dasein in 2020. Never had I ever seen such a sharp distinction between me and everything else that ever was. Even when it still exists but has nothing more before it and has settled, but is only one of its modes of being towards okay, even when one is without illusions and is ready for anything. Gefasstein of alles. So even when one is without illusions and is ready for anything. All right, so now he's talking about me, because if you guys have listened to me on some of my tears, especially like some of my self-righteous drive streams, I've practically said those words paraphrased, right? So I am on the record having this attitude of like, I have no delusions or illusions about this situation, and they might blow my head off tomorrow or come at me with the heavies in the door and lock me away in a hole or whatever horrible fucking threat that is very real that all of the conspiracies were true about, okay? And ready for anything. Yes, this is why I am not 225 pounds anymore. It's because I'm ready for anything. And if I'm ever 225 pounds again, I assure you, it won't be fat. But anyway. Sorry, there it is again. So the eighth hermetic principle, the principle of care, generative principle. I appreciate it when people speak of this. I showed up here late and thus pretty cool, man. I'll be rewatching tomorrow. Listen, everybody deserves tough love, so go watch Mark Passio's lecture on dark care. I can't remember if he made that lecture during the pandemic or not, but that lecture will help you understand Dasein as care, in the difference between the good sense of care and the evil sense of care, and why care can matter and be applicable in the sense of evil. A different kind of care altogether. We are all standing together at the pillars of enlightenment. Yes, we are the living lasers made of love. Okay. I'm going to start from this mid-passage. Wait, no. Hopelessness. It's like I keep going above that word when I spent so much time on the hopelessness thing. S ahead of itself, lies hidden. The ahead of itself, as an item in the structure of care, tells unambiguously that in Dasein there is always something still outstanding. Im Dasein, im noch etwas auslet. The verb ostehen and the noun ostand, which we usually translate as something still outstanding, etc., ordinarily used in German to apply to a debt or a bank deposit, which, from the point of view of the lender or depositor, has yet to be repaid, to him liquidated or withdrawn. Oh, that's interesting. So here, it seems that Heidegger is punning with the economic soul debt, right? And by using the debt terms in relationship to a Dasein situation, and not as an example, but as a symbol, right? To say it is an appropriate symbol of a Dasein experience functionally. That's cool. All right. That gets all into where people get into the Matrix has you, so on and so forth. And the Matrix does have people, right? But it doesn't have people the way you think. I came to my own independent conclusion that the whole way that AIX, the thing about, Archaics and AIX, Jason Brashear, it's just like, his terminology is quite appropriate based on what he has read to cite as the vernacular of explaining some of these things that fall into the quite sudden irregularities that seem to not be appropriately catalyst that create changes in the everydayness of Dasein, where all of a sudden, the quote world changes, seemingly overnight. And so, I think that there's not so much on the boomers, and I don't boomer bash as bad as I used to, but there was a lot of boomers that were the big gatekeepers of just a few years ago, and on a spiritual level, they had to be taken down from their authorities, which, it's kind of like, don't feel bad for someone because they lost their job, right? Relax. The universe will care about what happens to them. If they're not someone in your world, you don't have to worry too much about whether they will be sufficiently cared for. But if it is no longer appropriate for a person to hold an authority, then the forces of the world have a way of correcting that seat of power, whether the world requires the illusion of the influence of the, quote, people or not. It is essential to the basic constitution of design that there is constantly something still to be settled. Einstand ich Unabgeschlossenheit. Oh man, these words are so obnoxiously big in German. Such a lack of totality signifies that there is something still outstanding in one's potentiality for being. But as soon as Dasein exists in such a way that absolutely nothing more is still outstanding in it, then it has already for this very reason become no longer being there. Nicht mehr Dasein. Its being is annihilated when what is still outstanding in its being has been liquidated. As long as Dasein is an entity, it has never reached its wholeness. Interesting. Let me get... What's that mean? All right. Die Behebung des Sonnenzustandes besagt Vernichtung seins, solange das Dasein als Sandes ist, hat es sein ganz nie erreicht. The verb beheben is used in the sense of cloning one's account, of liquidating it by withdrawing money from the bank. The noun ganz, which we shall translate as wholeness, is to be distinguished from gains. I think it's gans and gains. There's umla, the two dots. I believe the two dots means that it's a short vowel, if I understand correctly. So there's no dots under the regular A, so that's like gains, I think. So gans and gains. From gains, which is whole, or occasionally totality, and Gensheit, which is totality. Okay, so that's fascinating, and that reminds me. And there's always a German relationship with a lot of these Japanese animes. There's a really interesting anime called Gantz, which also has a live action adaptation that I maybe saw at one episode of or something. Gantz is a pretty intense anime, and like the word means wholeness here, right? With Gans, there's a sense of these characters are unwhole. Like there's a crazy thing going on with a reproduction process, which is akin to a high-tech facsimile of yourself, right? It's kind of like, you're under the influence of some system that has a machine at the center of the system that will, that if you die doing what you have to do for this system, it will print a new you out, or something like that, right? And so, it's this wholeness factor, right? Because then this thing is making you whole. I think that there might be a little bit of a Germanism going on with this anime. So that anime just comes to mind. All right, there's a reason why I loved anime, and it's because shit like this comes up in conversation. But anyway, okay, so let me go back up here. That's right, I was up here. But if it gains such wholeness, this gain becomes the utter loss of being in the world. In such a case, it can never again be experienced as an entity. The reach for the impossibility of experiencing Dasein ontically as a whole, which is als Sandes Genses, and therefore of determining its character ontologically in its being a whole, does not lie in any imperfection of our cognitive powers. The hindrance lies rather in the being of this entity, that which cannot ever be such as any experience which pretends to get Dasein in its grasp would claim, eludes in principle any possibility of getting experienced at all. But in that case, is it not a hopeless undertaking to try to discern in Dasein its ontological totality of being? We cannot cross out the ahead of itself as an essential item in the structure of care. But how sound are the conclusions which we have drawn from this? Has not the impossibility of getting the whole of Dasein into our grasp been inferred by an argument which is merely formal? Or have we not at bottom inadvertently posited that Dasein is something present at hand, ahead of which something that is not yet present at hand is constantly shoving itself? Have we, in our argument, taken being not yet and the ahead in a sense that is genuinely existential? Has our talk of the end and totality been phenomenally appropriate to Dasein? has the expression death had a biological signification, or one that is existential ontological, or indeed any signification that has been adequately and surely delimited? Have we indeed exhausted all possibilities for making Dasein accessible in its wholeness? We must answer these questions before the problem of Dasein's totality can be dismissed as nugatory, nichtiges. This question, both the existential question of whether a potentiality for being a whole is possible, and the existential question of the state of being of end and totality, is one in which these lurks the task of giving a positive analysis for some phenomena of existence which up till now have been left aside. In the center of these considerations, we have the task of characterizing ontologically Dasein's being at an end of achieving an existential conception of death. The investigation relating to these topics are divided up as follows: the possibility of experiencing the death of others, and the possibility of getting a whole Dasein into our grasp. That which is still outstanding, the end in totality, how the existential analysis of death is distinguished from other possible interpretations of this phenomenon, a preliminary sketch of the existential ontological structure of death, being towards death, and the everydayness of Dasein, every day being towards death, and the full existential conception of death, and existential projection of an authentic being towards death. All right. Woo! So by section 48, until section 53, I may want to play death in the next live stream. But anyway, 47. The possibility of experiencing the death of others and the possibility of getting a whole Dasein into our grasp. Oh, well, actually, I could probably start playing death now. But anyway, I'm going to take another break right here. This is an excellent spot to break, and we're going to roll with some more Orbit Culture. This is the title track, Odyssey. Oh, there we go. Okay. Yeah. All right, good. All right, done. Let's let that play because I want to cut through the ad. All right, we're rolling here for 45 minutes to an hour or so. There will be there'll probably be like one more break, right? So there you go. I like to typically pick an album and just run right through it. All right. So, all right, welcome back. And I just wanted to say, like, if voluntary, you mentioned something about misunderstanding what I meant about care. Don't be afraid to ask me what I mean by something, right? Like, if you don't quite get it, try. Because, like, in what context? The whole thing, or in a specific relationship? Was it like a was it you not understanding the pandemic side of the allegory? You tell me. Anyway, so here we are at chapter 47. The possibility of experiencing the death of others and the possibility of getting a whole Dasein into our grasp. All right. Excuse me. There, I had time for the mute button on that one. You're welcome. When Dasein reaches its wholeness in death, it simultaneously loses the being of its, quote, there, unquote. By its transition to no longer Dasein, or nicht mehr Dasein, it gets lifted right out of the possibility of experiencing this transition and of understanding it as something experienced. Surely, this sort of thing is denied to any particular Dasein in relation to itself. But this makes the death of others more impressive. In this way, a termination, it's either Beendigung or Beendigung, of Dasein becomes objectively accessible. Dasein can thus gain an experience of death, all the more so because Dasein is essentially being with others. In that case, the fact that death has been thus objectively given must make possible an ontological delimitation of Dasein's totality. Thus, from the kind of being which Dasein possesses as being with one another, we might draw the fairly obvious information that when the Dasein of others has come to an end, it might be chosen as a substitute theme for our analysis of Dasein's totality. But does this lead us to our appointed goal? Even the Dasein of others, when it has reached its wholeness in death, is no longer Dasein. In the sense of being no longer in the world, does not dying mean going out of the world and losing one's being in the world. Yet, when someone has died, his being no longer in the world, if we understand it in an extreme way, is still a being. But in the sense of the being, just present at hand and no more, of a corporeal thing which we encounter, in the dying of the other we can experience that remarkable phenomenon of being which may be defined as the changeover of an entity from Dasein's kind of being of life to no longer Dasein. This parrot has ceased to be! Monty Python. Right? Like, just as I'm reading that, I'm just saying, I gotta do, it's the best example, and it's funny. The dead parrot bit from Monty Python, considered one of the many greatest bits of all time. Recreated on SNL when the two Montys were there to reenact it quite a few years ago. But, he's trying to explain that this parrot's state of existence is not suitable for sale. Because it's the body of a dead parrot. It's not being a parrot anymore. It's being a dead parrot. It's just being a dead thing, right? It's no longer qualifies as being a part of the world of a pet shop. It needs to be part of the world of a pet cemetery. Okay, so you were partially listening, not knowing what you were exactly reading about. I checked in to see what you were up to, and then I decided to listen. I got kind of drunk tonight, and at first I can't fault you for whatever the hell you were in the middle of doing, right? Not that I'm faulting anybody. I'm here trying to make sure that my live studio audience is fully engaged. But anyway. So anyway, yeah, that's my point is that joke is like trying to explain Dasein to someone is like trying to explain to the shop clerk that his parrot is dead and not sellable. It's literally the same thing practically. It's great. But anyway, thus, from the kind of being which Dasein possesses as being with one another, we might draw the fairly obvious information that when the Dasein of others has come to an end, it might be chosen as a substitute theme for our analysis of Dasein's totality. But does this lead us to our appointed goal? Even the Dasein of others, when it has reached its wholeness in death, is no longer Dasein. In the sense of being no longer in the world, does not dying mean going out of the world and losing one's being in the world? Yet, when someone has died, his being no longer in the world, if we understand it in an extreme way, is still a being. Oh, I'm sorry, I read this already, but I'm glad I did because I understand it a little bit better second round. But in the sense of the being just present at hand and no more of a corporeal thing, which we encounter in the dying of the other, we can experience the remarkable phenomenon of being, which may be defined as the changeover of an entity from Dasein's kind of being of life to no longer Dasein. The end of the entity's qua Dasein in the beginning of the same entity qua something present at hand. However, in this way of interpreting the changeover from Dasein to being just present at hand and no more, the phenomenal content is missed, inasmuch as in the entity which still remains, we are not presented with a mere corporeal thing. From a theoretical point of view, even the corpse which is present at hand is still a possible object for the student of pathological anatomy, whose understanding tends to be oriented to the idea of life. This something which is just present at hand and no more is more than a lifeless material thing. In it, we encounter something unalive which has lost its life. Now, hang on. Let's get this. Okay, so the second annotation we're not reading the first one. All right. But even this way of characterizing that which still remains, des not verbliebenden. If that which still remains is what des not verbliebenden means, then that's a German equivalent to the title of Kang the Conqueror in Loki. The Des Nachtverbleiden. That's what you would have called Kang in the German version of Loki, I would imagine. I would like to see if they made a German dub of Loki that plays in Germany and Germanic-speaking countries, and I want to know how Kang's title sounds. Because they never call him Kang, and they don't call him Victor Timely unless it's specifically the episodes where they're talking to and about the variant. So He Who Remains is going to be maybe not Des, because I imagine Des maybe means that, So it will be whatever the pronoun for he is. But anyway, the deceased, der Verstorben, or der Verstorben, If Verstorben means deceased in German, I almost want to take that like as a band name or something. That's good. If there isn't a German like death metal band called Verstorben, there should be. Anyway. Okay, so you got excited. I was talking about care, and then I stopped abusing alcohol, but I went back to work for other people in a debt and death paradigm within a Ponzi scheme. So I decided to celebrate with poison and kind of made an ass of myself. Loki. All right. Well, okay, so now that you've had your fun with Loki, I would recommend that you turn to the All-Father for some wisdom, and not let Loki let you have fun all day, because he will let you dance right off a fucking cliff. Because he's not going to interfere with your free will or your interest in ignorance. So, I'm glad you had fun as the fool. Now pick up the wisdom and be a victim no more. The deceased, as distinct from the dead person, dem Gestorben, has been torn away from those who have remained behind. Den Hinterbliebenen. Hinterbliebenen, I think that's it. And is an object of concern in the ways of funeral rites, intermittent, and the cult of graves. And that is so because the deceased, in his kind of being, is still more than just an item of equipment, environmentally ready to hand, about which one can be concerned, in tarrying alongside him in their mourning and commemoration. Those who have remained behind are with him, in a mode of respectful solitude. Thus, the relationship of being which one has towards the dead is not to be taken as a concernful being alongside something ready to hand. In such being with the dead, dem Toten, the deceased himself is no longer factically there. However, when we speak of being with, we always have in view being with one another in the same world. The deceased has abandoned our world and left it behind. But in terms of that world, aus er her, those who remain can still be with him. Let's see here. Yeah, you went back today. Yep. The greater the phenomenal appropriateness with which we take the no longer da sign of the deceased, the more plainly is it shown that in such being with the dead, the authentic being come to an end. Zu Endes kommen sein of the deceased is precisely the sort of thing which we do not experience. Death does indeed reveal itself as a loss, but a loss such as experienced by those who remain. In suffering this loss, however, we have no way of access to the loss of being as such which the dying man suffers. The dying of others is not something which we experience in a genuine sense. At most, we are always just there alongside. All right. 2. Sind dabei. Literally, the verb dabei sein means simply to be at the place, to be there alongside. But it also has other connotations which give an ironical touch to this passage, for it may also mean to be engaged in some activity, to be at it, to be in the swim, to be ready to be counted in. And like Thor, not allowing situation things to expand or contract too far. Aye, good. You're getting it. Keep working with the gods. And even if by thus being there alongside it were possible and feasible for us to make plain to ourselves psychologically the dying of others. This would by no means let us grasp the way to be, which we would then have in mind, namely, coming to an end. We are asking about the ontological meaning of the dying of the person who dies as a possibility of being which belongs to his being. We are not asking about the way in which the deceased has Dasein with, or is still a Dasein, noch Dasein, which those who are left behind. If death as experienced in others is what we are enjoined to take us the theme for our analysis of Dasein's end and totality, this cannot give us either ontically or ontologically what it presumes to give. Now, I do find it interesting that so I'm assuming that this is an accurate translation when the phrasing here is, what is it? Left behind, where he's talking about left behind. Would be to have in mind who dies, possibly being belongs to his being. We're not asking about the way in which. Yeah, so we are not asking about the way in which the deceased has Dasein with, or is still a Dasein, nach Dasein, which those who are left behind. So the left behind are the living, the ones still here amongst this Dasein. So to be left behind is the suggestion that we were all supposed to die together. We're all supposed to die at the same time and move on at the same time. You left me behind. So I would disagree that in using that terminology, but that is familiar terminology to the vernacular in which we speak of the dead, which is a certain perception of the world and of mortality. You see, those of us here doing this thing, you can have your reason to look at it as when someone dies, we are left behind, and that's really what's up, right? I say when someone dies, they're missing out. We haven't been left behind. They said, you keep going. Leave me behind you. That's what they said. They said, leave me behind you when they left. You keep going. That's the idea. That's supposed to be the blessing that the eldest generation gives to us. Not to threaten us all the time because of the integrity of some structure. And even if, by thus being there alongside, it were possible and feasible for us to make plain to ourselves psychologically the dying of others, this would by no means let us grasp the way to be which we would then have in mind, namely coming to an end. We are asking about the ontological meaning of the dying of the person who dies as a possibility of being which belongs to his being. We are not asking about the way in which the deceased has Dasein with, or is still a Dasein, noch Dasein, with those who are left behind. If death as experienced in others is what that's right, I was getting up back there to make that point, because I read this down here? Why was I down there? No. That's what I'm sorry. Man, I really botched that one. Alright, so, okay. Everything we must choose for ourselves. Okay. But above all, the suggestions that the dying of others is a substitute theme for the ontological analysis of Dasein's totality and the setting of its account rests on a presupposition which demonstrably fails altogether. To recognize Dasein's kind of being, this is what one presupposes when one is of the opinion that any Dasein may be substituted for another at random, so that what cannot be experienced in one's own Dasein is accessible in that of a stranger, but is this presupposition actually so baseless? Indisputably, the fact that one Dasein can be represented by another belongs to its possibilities of being with one another in the world. In everyday concern, constant and manifold use is made of such representability. Whenever we go anywhere or have anything to contribute, we can be represented by someone within the range of that environment with which we are most closely concerned. The great multiplicity of ways of being in the world in which one person can be represented by another not only extends to the mere refined modes of publicly being with one another, but is likewise germane to those possibilities of concern which are restricted within definite ranges and which are cut to the measure of one's occupation, one's social status, or one's age. But the very meaning of such representation is such that it is always a representation in und bei something, that is to say, in concerning oneself with something. But proximally, and for the most part, everyday Dasein understands itself in terms of that with which it is customarily concerned. One is what one does in relation to this sort of being, the everyday manner in which we join with one another in absorption in the world of our concern. Representability is not only quite possible, but is even constitutive for our being with one another. Here, one Dasein can and must, within certain limits, be another Dasein. Right. And that's the whole bit with the way worlds change or whatever, right? But that's a particular kind of thing. There's a world that I step into at work. There's a whole bunch of shared perception of reality going on at my garden store, in the context to everything happening within business and the limits in which people at work I let into my world. I have had a handful of coworkers that I have vetted as super cool and said, dude, this is what I do. Check out my YouTube channel, man, right? At the end of the day, I'm out here, right? And even though I'm small town, down the line, it'd be interesting if I'm still working there, they find my channel, and they find things that concern them. Especially if I've said it and they see that I'm like driving to work and I got my shirt on. It's just like, oh my God, he said that wearing our shirt. Right? That's why I try to do certain things, I like to take my shirt off anyway, but that's also a good excuse is that I'm in the company shirt and I got to go live. Right? The only time I don't do it is if it's fucking freezing. And it has to be really fucking freezing. Because I did it on Greyhorn Pagans last week. I did a stream in my car with my shirt off. And it was I don't know, it was maybe 30 degrees. No, not 30. It was maybe 38 degrees or something outside. It was just above freezing. And my car has the heater is fucking broken. Okay? I'm paying off my escape next week. I owe $100, $99 and change on my old car. I can finally get rid of that, which will make everybody happy because that frees up driveway space. And then once I've gotten rid of it, I have to take care of my bills with my mechanic. So my life is something. Okay, so I missed annotation 2 while reading. That's over here. It's this one. Indisputably, the facts that one's design can be represented. So it says here, vertretbarkit. The verb vertreten means to represent in the sense of deputizing for someone. It should be noted that the verb vorstellen is also sometimes translated as to represent, but in the quite different sense of affording a representation of ideas or of something. Okay. Let's take a look here. I'm just going to save that spot, and there we are. Okay. However, this possibility of representing breaks down completely if the issue is one of representing the possibility of being, which makes up Dasein's coming to an end, and which, as such, gives to it its wholeness. No one can take the other's dying away from him. Of course, someone can go to his death for another, but that always means to sacrifice oneself for the other in some definite affair. Such dying for can never signify that the other has thus had his death taken away in even the slightest degree. Dying is something that every Dasein itself must take upon itself at the time. By its very essence, death is in every case mine, insofar as it is at all. And indeed, death signifies a peculiar possibility of being in which the very being of one's own Dasein is an issue. In dying, it is shown that the mineness and existence are ontologically constitutive for death. All right, we have an annotation here. But we don't have, okay, it must not be a normal annotation. It's probably a different symbol that I don't understand. That's fine. Dying is not an event. It is a phenomenon to be understood existentially, and it is to be understood in a distinctive sense, which must be still more closely delimited. But if ending as dying is constitutive for Dasein's totality, then the being of this wholeness itself must be conceived as an existential phenomenon of a Dasein, which is in each case one's own. In ending and in Dasein's being a whole for which such ending is constitutive, there is by its very essence no representing. There are the facts of the case existentially, and one fails to recognize this when one interposes the expedient of making the dying of others a substitute theme for the analysis of totality. So, once again, the attempt to make Dasein's being a whole accessible in a way that is appropriate to the phenomenon has broken down, but our deliberations have not been negative in their outcome. They have been oriented by the phenomena, even if only rather roughly. We have indicated that death is an existential phenomena. Our investigation is thus forced into purely existential orientation to the Dasein, which is in every case one's own. The only remaining possibility for the analysis of death as dying is either to form a purely existential conception of this phenomenon, or else to forego any ontological understanding of it. And how you doing, Droopy Eyes? When we characterized the transition from Dasein to no longer Dasein as being no longer in the world, we showed further that Dasein's going out of the world in the sense of dying must be distinguished from the going out of the world of that which merely has life. Des Lebenden. In our terminology, the ending of anything that is alive is denoted as perishing, verenden. We can see the difference only if the kind of ending which Dasein can have is distinguished from the end of a life. Of course, dying may also be taken physiologically and biologically, but the medical concept of the exodus does not coincide with that of perishing. From the foregoing discussion of the ontological possibility of getting death into our grasp, it becomes clear at the same time that the substructure of entities with another kind of being, presence at hand, or life, thrust themselves to the fore unnoticed and threaten to bring confusion to the interpretation of this phenomenon, even to the first suitable way of presenting it. We can encounter this phenomenon only by seeking, for our further analysis, an ontological adequate way of defining the phenomenon which are constitutive for it, such as end and totality. Wowzer. All right, so it's 7:32. Let me see here. So for 48, how long is 48? All right. I kind of think that's too many pages. I want to be yeah, it's too many pages. I want to be wrapped up at 8. I don't want to be wrapped up at like 8:15. I think I have done a damn good job tonight. I want to thank all of you for coming, for being supportive. Please like, share, subscribe, hit the bell button, and follow me on social media. Zerilath 369. Yeah, wait, is it 369 or 036? I always forget. Hold on a second. Because usually when I go live, I post the Mines, Zerilath on Mines, and I post on X. So yeah, just Zerilath 369 on X and Zerilath on Mines. Anthony makes videos. You have done a damn good job. I felt like my being was engaged in the swim of this stream. Oh, well, thank you very much. That's an awesome. That's an honor and compliment. Thank you. All right, guys. I will catch you on the flip side.